And people in the back can hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. I'm just going to use this voice. It's a heavily animated show that I'm stepping in front of. So I'm going to keep doing this. So the title of my lecture today is an introduction to Devil's Advocacy, why you should consider siding with the villain or becoming a villain yourself. So you may be wondering after reading this title, what's so great about being a villain? Why would you decide to be a villain? Anyone?
Power.
Fun.
Power, fun, what else?
Freedom.
Good clothes.
Underdog.
Yeah. John got it. Better fashion. You got the best looks on the evil side, guys. Look at that penis. Yes. You also get better music. I don't know if the audio is going to work on this, but it's not going to work. If you remember, Playing with the Big Boys Now from Prince of Egypt is a showstopper. All right, it's very delayed reaction audio. That's cool. Also, this guy. If you haven't listened to this guy's theme song on repeat once in your life, you haven't lived yet. All right, he's not going to stop while I keep going on. You also have better lines. The man was right. Like, what land war have we won in Asia at this point? And better powers, like the ability to stop death or catch Thor's hammer or anything vaguely omnipotent. So if villains are so great, why do they tend to be defeated? Not always, but often. Thoughts?
They're wrong?
Bias.
Hubris.
Bias, they're wrong. Hubris. All good answers. Lame morality plays. So what is the villain? How do we define that as a culture? We call them bad guy, antagonists, anti-heroes. I wanted to look at the linguistics of it. Here are some words that we have associated with the bad guy in the past. And notice that all these definitions don't necessarily indicate evil or badness. You got rustic from the country, you have an accuser, which may or may not be a bad thing, depending. So I started to question, are villains actually evil? Can someone from the class please read the definition of a villain from Writing Excuses, a Professional Podcast? Oh, can people not read that? Okay,
I can read it.
All right, go ahead.
An antagonist is someone actively working against the interests of the protagonist. A villain is someone who has an agenda. A villain is actively evil, and an antagonist isn't always. Someone can be working against you and not be evil, and have good motivations or good motives.
All right, interesting. So what's actively evil? Anyone?
Being a jerk.
All right, cool. Being a jerk.
Being a landlord?
What's that? All right. Hold that thought. Stephani's on to me. So to me personally, this is just my beliefs. Harming someone on purpose is not a good thing. Also, plotting to harm someone, even if you don't get away with it, is probably bad. And destroying something on purpose, so long as the thing is relatively innocuous. Of course, innocent and innocuous are problematic concepts to begin with, but I'm not going to talk about that today. Next Meekling talk. So as a culture, just from observation, we seem to believe that people are good or evil based on a combination of their actions and their motivation. Do you guys think that makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And we do believe it to be individualized. So I'm going to say, we're just going to say for the purposes of today, we're talking about Western hegemonic morality because we live in the United States. And you can actually do math with this. Yeah. Where a person's actions multiplied by the goodness of the actions and a person's intentions multiplied by the goodness of their intentions creates a line on a graph that will show up here. Whether they're good or evil. So consider for a second, you have a doctor. We're going to decide if this doctor is good or evil. The doctor is trying to save the patient. Is that a good or a bad intention?
Trying to save the patient?
Trying to save the patient. Yeah, that's good intention, all right? Say they give them an antidote or an antibiotic. It's penicillin. They're allergic to penicillin. They die. Is that a good or a bad action?
Good action?
Is it good or bad?
Bad action, good motivation.
Good intention, bad
What
action?
if it wasn't that the patient wanted to begin?
Maybe it was non-consensual. There's so much going on, guys. We as a culture really don't like these gray areas. Like, you could ask anyone in this room, and if you plot their answer on a graph, you get all over the place. And we generally agree trying to save patients' lives is a good idea. So what happens at the end of the day is who determines who's good and evil is the person who determines the values of X and Y here. Who knows their religion? What's the Council of Trent? Yeah, Counter-Reformation. This formula should look familiar to you. In my personal history, I tend to attribute our Western idea of good actions plus good motivations coming from the faith plus works thing, which is a Council of Trent, Counter-Reformation, Catholic thing from back in the 1500s. So it's old, it's entrenched, we're not over it. So what does our culture conflate with evil? And by that I mean, what are things that we associate with evil in our stories that aren't necessarily bad actions or bad motivations?
Fucking.
Yes!
Nice.
Yes, that's number 2 in here.
Yes, nailed it.
Yes. I had much better transitions in the keynotes. It was actually on fire. So, all right, what else? What else is bad?
Lying?
Oh, what I said earlier?
Rebelliousness?
Yeah, what?
Right there?
What? Yeah.
Oh, you want me to repeat it?
Would you please? Would you please?
Oh, yeah. Anything that's different from like what's society's normal.
Society's normal.
Dissent?
Yeah.
Dissent?
Dissent, yeah, deviance. So, imperfect bodies, femininity, religions that aren't waspy enough, darker skin tones, LGBT folks, mental illness, drugs and alcohol, having fun, and darkness in general. Which, why do we think darkness is evil? Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's... So, what I did, the core of this presentation is looking at the villains and the intersection of what we think is evil versus what is actually evil. And it was a little terrifying. I might have to stay down here, guys. Forces of nature, Leviathan, Skill and Charybdis are just a whirlpool and some cliffs that are actively evil somehow. The storm, I still don't know why this guy is evil. I think he's just the nighttime. The Happening has the plans trying to kill everybody. Those are the wolves from Beauty and the Beast. Forest as evil is a really common trope from Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, really classic fantasies. Blair Witch is one of my favorite incarnations of that. She doesn't do anything except, she has no manifestation except for the cracking of sticks. And the fact that that can become so terrifying and evil to us is fascinating to me. Godzilla is the classic example of nature. Sorry? Sorry?
I said, you have enough cord, or do you want to hold on to it?
Oh, do I have
Yeah,
enough
just don't
cord?
move too far yet. You put like right here's fine. That's easy.
Okay, so I can do this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Move a little, move a little this
to
way.
left.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Go.
All right, I can't breathe now.
You're perfect.
All right. Godzilla is a classic example of humans treading too far into nature and then nature lashing back at them. And that's the basis for a lot of horror movies, The Happening. Yes?
Pretty much all
Okay, are you? Okay.
Sorry about later.
If you're signaling to me,
No,
let me know.
No.
We also have non-Christians related to that. So does that definition of pagan, pagus from the country sound familiar to anyone? What does it mean?
Hillbillies.
It's the same as villain. It has a very similar etymology in Latin. And think about, oh gosh, this is very blurry. Okay, so villain comes from Latin villa, meaning rustic or from the country. Pagan is Latin pagus, from the country. So in the Roman Empire, why would you call someone from the country bad?
Because they're poor.
Because we're
And-
trying to conquer them.
Because they're poor and we're trying to take their stuff, even though they don't have anything. Like America.
They have resources, and that's the big thing.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that we have, okay, so, and then the church goes nuts with it, and it goes from pagan to villain to heathen, not actively enrolled in the army of Christ, not actively evangelizing for Christianity. This happened when the Roman Empire became the Catholic Church in in like the 400s, I want to say. So, all right, who's this gal?
Oh, the queen from
Golden Compass?
Close.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Lion, Witch, and
Oh,
the
yes.
Wardrobe, which is a metaphor for what?
Christianity.
It's about Jesus, guys. This is the other image is a German woodcut of what should resemble to you the climactic sequence of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where she kills Aslan and is in a metaphor for killing Jesus. And she's the active, evil, wintry darkness antagonized in that. So also interesting, a lot of these villains just happen to be practitioners of religion who aren't Christianity. We have the Shadow Man, who's a voodoo practitioner from Princess and the Frog. That's an Indiana Jones villain who's obsessed with a Hindu goddess, Kali. And we also have the Road to El Dorado villain. All of these villains derive their power from a religion that is just not Jesus. And when they acquire that power, they're always depicted as much more monstrous and much more evil. And more recently, who are these guys? I'm sorry, the images are not clear. So very popular these days are
White men with beards.
White men with beards, yes.
you can't see right
Chris
now.
Pratt?
They are Islamic folks who are excessively racialized and done up like that. That's the villain from London Has Fallen and Saladin from Kingdom of Heaven. So you see where I'm going with this. Let's pick on Disney because it's easy. What's interesting about these three guys to me is that they're supposed to take place in casts where there are no actual white people, where the entire cast is supposed to be of more or less the same ethnicity. But when you look at them and compare them to the protagonists, the protagonists are all white passing, but the villains all have these like extra exacerbated racialized traits to the point where they look like political cartoons directed at people who belong to that racial group. Jafar looks a lot like those super bad Islamic guys on the previous slide. This, is in live action too, especially in Indiana Jones and James Bond. Who knows what Orientalism is? Yes.
Oh, you want me to tell you? Oh my
Sure.
God.
You don't want to.
I was gonna say exoticism too.
Yeah, exoticism is a synonym.
Oh God. I mean, it's like a subjective or a way of
Othering.
yeah, othering and making something seem like it's exotic or cool because it's not you, but then also like putting it in a different place that because it's not you.
Mm-hmm. No, that's perfect.
Also, I think as a contribution, a specific hierarchical set of examining that also defines the Middle East, the Far East, and it became capital O developed as a full-on
As a type.
scholarship, as a mode of critical theory and criticism by a bunch of white European men.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I was going to cite him, and then I decided not to cite white guys, so we'll just leave that there. And it shouldn't come just like the whole villains are non-Christians thing. It justifies imperialism. These people are evil if left to their own devices. They're so bad. They need civilization of the whites to come and take them over and teach them what morality is. This one's messed up, and Hollywood is not over this one. There's a lot of modern films that villainize folks with disabilities and disfigurement. They're not the same thing, but Hollywood seems to think they are. This is an ancient idea of a disfigurement or a disability in the body equals a disfigurement in the soul, that somehow being physically wrong makes you morally wrong. So some of these characters are responding to that stigma in their motivations to overthrow society. Weird how you would want to do that. And what troubles me about this is even in things as progressive as you can't see it very well, but that's the villain from Wonder Woman. It is a is a woman who I think is an immigrant and also has a full facial prosthetic. And Wonder Woman was considered such like a progressive film, but we're still like demonizing this person with a disfigurement. Neurodivergent people, everyone's favorite villains are just so crazy. And one thing I notice about the Hannibal Lecters and the Jokers and the Norman Batemans and Bellatrix is that they're all white too. Like there's a weird othering of mental illness as the only thing that could make a white person evil. Can we talk about Captain Hook for a second? Who has a full-on suicidal ideation on screen in a children's movie with Robin Williams in it. I'm not over that. My favorite category is women who do things. Starting with Eve, ending with that girl in the ring. We have Grendel's mom. Everyone loves Maleficent. She's from the bad Indiana Jones movie. She's another favorite. Who doesn't love She-Go? Hella. Even the evil robots are female or femme-gendered. And you've also got, women on women misogyny stuff happening. Can we talk about Yzma real quick? She's been running the Inca Empire for decades on her own as a woman by herself. She also has a chunky, hot male sidekick who's probably her concubine, and she's a woman in STEM. But she's evil. I'm going to watch a movie about her. Credit for this whole slide goes to gay Twitter. Because I don't actually know what I'm talking about very well here, but gay Twitter tells me that all these folks are queer-coded.
Yeah, Jafar and Star need to be in there too.
They were up there, yeah. May or may not be popular knowledge that Ursula was based on the drag queen Divine. Xerxes from 300, I never thought about that until yesterday. Powerpuff Girls, Katra, even Team Rocket.
Yeah.
So all you guys are like, oh, Tamara, you're so behind. And according to some of the YouTubers I watch, this is a holdover from the Hays Code, which banned signs of, or
Lots of salacious materials.
everything good. It banned everything good. So after researching all this, I was coming to the conclusion that villains aren't defeated because they're actively evil, but rather to teach that deviance from a specific societal norm will be punished, as Stephanie said on slide 2.
Oh, oops.
So, and when I'm looking at this, I'm like, all right, I'm a woman. Do I want to be on the good side? Do I want to be kidnapped and like manhandled by all these weirdos? If you are a powerful woman, you're required to give up your power in order to remain good, or marry a guy with bad hair who can't even sing, or you wind up dead in a fridge,
Yep.
or, on fire. There's Rachel. If you're not white and on the good side, at best, you're probably going to be a sidekick with maybe a name. Or you try to help some really stupid white people, only to have them axe murder you. Or you're the first one to die in any kind of battle scene. I'm going to rush real quick here. Oops. Something troubling here was that I found that there was a lot more femme villains versus femme protagonists. The femme villains were held up as extra powerful, as almost too powerful. The femme protagonists were slightly less powerful and a little more conforming. The easy example here is She-Go versus Kim Possible, where She-Go's she's single the whole time and kind of has her own business. She's an independent contractor. And Kim Possible, her day job is a cheerleader? Nothing against that, but she tends to err on the side of more traditional femininity. The scarier one to me personally was iconic white guy heroes, so like Indiana Jones, Batman, comic book guys, were always up against men of color, and not always, but often up against men of color, or against white guys who had like one thing that was off about them, or one thing that was wrong or deviant about them. And the reason why that freaked me out, so we know by now that villains are constructed and then defeated to reinforce white cis male supremacy. What's this? Do you guys, I know it's hard to see, but does this look familiar enough to
the patch coding system from Germany in the late 30s.
Yeah, these are the coding system that they used to put people in concentration camps, the Nazis back in the day, in the Nazi regime. And the overlap between the categories on this chart and the categories I just showed you was absolutely terrifying to me. So people are always confused as to why Nazism is having a resurgence in this country and yada yada, but after doing this presentation, I'm not surprised at all, because we've been demonizing exactly the same people as the Nazis via our children's movies, our shows, our storytelling, and we as artists and creators of narrative are responsible partially to shift that narrative away from these deviant people and empower them instead of demonizing them. So, in short, I'm going to wrap up real quick here. Villains are the embodiment of accumulated structural violence, child abuse, violence against women, imperialism, and racism. They're not evil. Villains refuse to obey the established order and thus are villainized. Often, their only crime is being a deviant with power, just trying to improve their own lot in life, or doing anything for that matter. So, how wearisome eternity so spent in worship paid, to whom we hate. Let us not then pursue, by force impossible, by leave unobtained, unacceptable, though in heaven our state of splendid vassalage, but rather seek our own good from ourselves and from our own live to ourselves, though in this vast recess free and to none accountable, preferring hard liberty before the easy yoke of servile pomp. Our greatness will appear then most conspicuous when great things of small, useful of hurtful, prosperous of adverse, we can create, and in what place soever, thrive under evil, and work ease out of pain through labor and endurance. This is villainy for you. Do you guys empathize more with monsters and freaks? Do you love your own weirdness? Más o menos? Would you like Kate Blanchett to play you in a movie? Do you want to overthrow tyrants? Take action against your oppressors? Do you want to prove a goddamn point? Do you refuse to swallow morality that's been shoved down your throat since childhood? Do you reject heteronormativity, capitalism, meritocracy, oligarchy, or worshiping a nameless, faceless god in the sky? Think about, how can you defeat the bully, the golden boy? Embrace your villainy. Turn your deviance into a weapon of justice. Always better to reign in hell than serve in heaven.